Hi, I'm Clint Smith, and this is Crash Course Black American History. Today, we'll be talking about the Black Women's Club movement. Women have always been central to the creation of social movements and have been able to find a unique voice for themselves in spaces that did not always want to acknowledge their power. Black women were present in so many important moments in American history. Because Black people had largely been stripped of their civil rights and did not receive the sort of protection from the state that is typically afforded to citizens, they were subjected to lynchings and other types of mob violence. Black women specifically were constantly dehumanized, threatened with rape and other forms of abuse. American culture justified this violence against Black women by portraying them as prostitutes, thieves, and just generally immoral people. So even though Black women were regularly sexually assaulted, because society depicted them in a hypersexualized, immoral way, they were seen as having brought it upon themselves. But Black women refused to stand for this. In an effort to protect their families and themselves, the Black Women's Club movement was started. It was a direct response to much of the violence and oppression that Black women were being subjected to. Though it's worth noting that this movement was, in many ways, an extension of a longer history of Black women's activism as orators, writers, abolitionists, and suffragists. When the Great Depression arrived in the 1930s, the self-help philosophies of Black women's clubs became less popular. Black Americans started turning to organizations like the NAACP or the National Urban League, groups that more directly challenged racist systems and advocated for large-scale structural change. In 1935, Mary McLeod Bethune, an educator and activist, led a portion of the National Association of Colored Women's members who did not agree with the self-help philosophy of the group to form the National Council of Negro Women. Recognizing a need for women to still advocate for themselves and their specific challenges, Bethune's new group focused on using political activism to improve the state of Black Americans and their communities. They also took an interest in international affairs, later going on to support the founding of the United Nations. Bethune also used her position as a director of the Division of Negro Affairs for President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which, according to the Smithsonian, made her the first Black woman to head a federal agency, to talk to the press about the need for Black Americans to have federal jobs and other opportunities. In fact, she was one of the main creators of the Fair Employment Practices Committee, which banned discrimination in all federal agencies and all industries engaged in wartime work. Utilizing similar strategies as the National Federation of Afro-American Women that came before them, the National Council of Negro Women also created a newspaper. It was called the Afro-American Women's Journal, and later, it was named Women United in 1949. Over the next few decades, the Black Women's Club movement continued to decline in popularity, in part because changing gender norms pushed against previously popular ideas of modesty and respectability, and also because as more working-class Black women became involved in the fight for political rights, they brought a different and often more expansive approach to how this work should be done. Still, some of these organizations remain active today, like the National Association of Colored Women, now known as the National Association for Colored Women's Club, Incorporated, and the National Council of Negro Women. They are both nonprofit organizations with the same goal, uniting Black women in pursuit of equality. It cannot be said enough. Black women have always been leaders at the forefront of American social movements. Our textbooks don't always include contributions that Black women have made to the fight for civil rights, but we should be absolutely clear that without their work, our country would not be where it is today. Black women's clubs were a central part of what allowed Black women to organize themselves and to come together as a community to make clear that in the fight for Black equality, Black women needed to be included. And in many ways, we continue to see the legacy of the women involved in these organizations today. If you look around at many of our contemporary civil rights efforts, many, if not most of them, are led by Black women.